Good evening. My name is Patricia Westberg. I'm the Santa Barbara Navy League Public Affairs Officer, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing our guest speakers this evening. Our first guest speaker tonight is here representing Submarine Force and the Navy's newest fast attack submarine, PCU, California. But we are very fortunate to have Captain Derenski here this evening to tell us a little bit about the ship and her crew. Captain Derenski enlisted in the Navy in 1981. At sea, he also served on the Florida, West Virginia, Toledo, and the Frank Cable, a submarine tender homeported in Guam. Attended the Naval War College and served as Deputy Commander, Submarine Squadron 4. Most interestingly, from 2007 to 2008, he commanded Forward Operating Base Kampuka in Iraq. Captain Derenski currently serves on the staff of Commander Submarine Group 2 as a representative to Electric Boat Shipyard. Please join me in welcoming Captain Bruce Derenski to Santa Barbara. Captain.
All right, my goals are straightforward. On behalf of the commanding officer and the crew of PCU California, Dana Nelson, the skipper, sends his regrets for not being here. He and his crew are the true rock stars of this moment. I'm a surrogate, but I am happy to talk to you about the ship. I do have a lot of background with the Virginia class. So we're going to move through this. The format is roughly split in half. I'll talk to you a little bit about construction and some of the innovations that we do there with shipbuilding. And then I'll move into some of the things that make California the most advanced warship, the most advanced submarine that will be delivered to the fleet and what makes her special. All right, this slide shows the current submarine classes that we have out doing business on behalf of the Navy and the American people today. You see at the top, the Ohio class is a Trident missile submarine, a ballistic missile submarine. So comparing her to the other three isn't really a fair comparison. It's apples and oranges. She's a missile shooter. She's the only class of missile shooter that we have. The fast attack classes are below that. You mentioned the Los Angeles decommissioning. She's still the workhorse of the fleet, the ship class that's out there in the largest numbers, the submarine force. And then the Seawolf, there's only 3 of those. And she was a very large, very capable ship, but designed and optimized for Cold War type missions. The Virginia class is the first submarine class that was built specifically for post-Cold War type missions. And I will talk to you about some of the innovations and how that is enhanced by what is going on in California today. Length and displacement-wise, she comes in at 377 feet, and she's a little more slender than the previous class. When Laura Bush spoke at the commissioning of the Texas, she used the words lethal elegance, which I always thought was kind of a poetic way to capture how these ships look compared to some of the other classes. Next slide, please. Now, building a ship is a very complicated device. We're talking about a 5-year construction timeline. And 5 years sounds like a very long time, but the lead ship of the class, the Virginia, was a 78-month ship. 78 months to build her from the time the first steel was poured until the ship was delivered. We are down now to, California will come in at about 61 months, and we're driving aggressively towards a 58-month ship. It's quite a challenge to build something this complex in that short amount of time, and it takes a dedicated effort by the shipbuilder, by procurement folks, by numerous vendors scattered throughout almost every state in the Union, plus the Navy to train the crew so that the crew is ready to take the ship to sea at the same time that the builder is ready to deliver it. How we used to build ships was basically you built the long tube first, the pressure hull. And then what you would do would be cut large holes and then load larger pieces of equipment through those holes, weld them up, and then all the smaller pieces of equipment would get shuttled piece by piece down through usually only 2 or 3 small hatches on the ship. It took a long time. It wasn't particularly efficient. What we've moved to is called modular construction. This is one of the phases in modular construction. What you're looking at here is the bow section of this one, I believe, is New Mexico, down in Northrop Grumman. But attached on the top of that would be the sonar dome, ultimately, and some of the forward ship sensors. But you see that this is working vertically. What vertical placement allows us to do is you'd see that the axis is all the way around the perimeter. And if you were to look inside this, up underneath it, it would look like a silo. and it would be staged at several levels with workers working completely around the perimeter of that staging. So it allows you to pack more workers in there to get things built faster. All right, so we take a few of those pieces, put them together into something called a module, and then flip it down onto its side. What you're seeing here, that first bow dome is enclosed inside the steel of the hull here. This is the very forward part of the ship. In that square in the center there, those odd-shaped things are the shutter doors for the torpedo tubes. And the ball that's coming out the front is the spherical array for the main sonar processing. So we built the tube. We packed workers into it to finish the outside. The things that go into the ship are built on rafts out in the open. That again allows more workers to work in much more places and build things faster. And then the raft gets end loaded into this module. And then modules are assembled into super modules. A super module weighs on the order of about 2,000 tons. Again, when we built Virginia, we built the ship in 10 pieces. Over time, we've developed the capability to handle larger and larger super modules, up to 2,000 tons a piece. So now when we're building California, we only build it in 4 pieces instead of 10. Again, it's faster. This shows pressure hull complete and final fit out in progress. You can see of those 4 super modules, they've all been assembled, they're brought together. If you were to peel off the plastic, so to speak, on one of these super modules and look underneath it, you would see a nearly complete ship. You bring the large pieces together, stitch weld them around the outside robotically, and then you send workers on the inside to start connecting up pieces. And as the ship comes to life, system by system, piece by piece, the crew is right there to test it out and do the final acceptance for the Navy. Instead of doing it all at the end, we're able to do much of it as the ship is being built. So this is a bow section super module moving into the assembly building. This one is taken at Electric Oak Shipyard in Connecticut. The process at Northrop Grumman, where California is being built, is identical. The trucks that are underneath it, there's about 200 of them, and they're all computer controlled so that they operate together. Once it's in the building, it moves over into the assembly bay. Here comes the stern section. You can see the rudder, the stern planes, dihedrals, and the propulsor. Again, like I said, if you peeled the plastic off the end there, it would be amazingly complete, right down to fire extinguishers that are in place, emergency breathing systems. The only thing that remains is hooking up the hydraulics and electrical. This is the habitability module that's in the center of the ship, so this is bunk rooms, this is the galley, dishwashing, that kind of thing. This is pressure hull complete after all those super modules are put in place, welded together. At this time, the crew is all in place and training up for sea trials and getting ready for delivery. And the ship moves over to the tracks, slides out of the building, and then it'll slide over onto something called a pontoon. The pontoon sits on top of a floating dry dock. And the pontoon is floated off and the ship dropped down to the bottom of the dry dock. And after the ship is in the bottom, the dock is flooded, the pontoon stays on the bottom, and the ship picks up. This is about the phase that California is in right now today. And then we open up the end of the dock, finish final certification training, and send the ship out on sea trials. California is scheduled to deliver roughly 4th of July this year. That's we're building one of these per year at alternating shipyards, and the contract is going to accelerate in 2 years to 2 ships per year. And that pretty much wraps up this video. Now I'll talk a little bit about the ship itself and what makes the ship special. The submarine force is tasked with these missions today. Our bread and butter during peacetime is ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. And the other ones that the ship spends a lot of time training and excelling at is anti-submarine warfare and anti-surface warfare. And then the other missions as tasked to individual hulls. All right, a few things about the Virginia that make her unique besides just her shape and the way that she's put together. You can see in this picture where it says wide array panels on the side of the ship, the entire outside skin of the ship becomes much more of a sensor than in previous ship classes. Before, you were pretty much stuck with just a sensor in the front and one out the back that you would drag on a towed array. The actual, there are many panels scattered throughout the body of the ship on the sail, and they all make the ear, the sonar that the ship drags through the water, larger and more capable. Next slide, please. You can see an advanced sealed delivery system. This is a program where we're working with special warfare folks to design the capability into the Virginia-class ship to haul a mini-sub around for delivery of SEALs. The current version is a wet sub, the SEAL delivery vehicle, and then future efforts are in the advanced SEAL delivery system, which is a dry sub. There's capability of controlling UAVs and crew sensors, and also a mine warfare capability that involves a module shot out the front of the ship. These are expensive ships, a lot of people on them. To risk this ship, again, in a direct transit of a minefield, probably not the best idea. The future of minefield transit is in unmanned vehicles that are controlled from this ship as a mother submarine. This is an interesting capability as well. The previous classes of ships were Tomahawk missile shooters. They had a land attack capability as well. The Tomahawk missile was either shot out the torpedo tubes or it was shot out one of 12 vertical launch cells built into the front of the ship. Now, vertical launch cells are on the outside. They're exposed to seawater, exposed to a very harsh environment as the ship has to operate from surface all the way down to test depth. So those systems to keep that missile dry and safe until it's time to fire it and have it reliably operate are very complex on I see a lot of submariners shaking their heads. A lot of maintenance involved with those, and even then, every now and then, you get a missile flight out and that missile would be unavailable, and because they're outside of the ship, they're not reloadable at sea. What you see going into Virginia class instead is a modified Trident missile tube. So instead of 12 individual launch cells, there's 2 very large cells that are carrying quad packs, or in this case, 6 missiles per large diameter missile tube. Because there's only 2 of them instead of 12, it's much cheaper, simpler, easier to maintain. Next. This is another innovation. We got rid of periscopes. We don't use periscopes on Virginia-class ships. We use something called a photonic suite. So every class of ship, every submarine ever built prior to this, the periscope was one of the primary design drivers of the ship because it had to be able to raise and lower. So by design, it had to run from the keel of the ship all the way up through the top of the sail. And then when you would raise it up, you would want to raise it as far as possible so that you could keep the ship deep. The problem with that is it forced us to put the control room in the very upper level of the submarine. And because of that, and the curvature of the hull, there wasn't a lot of room up there. The control room on previous classes of ships is very cramped. And what we've done now with the photonic suite, it's similar to a digital camera that's mounted at the end of an extendable mast. But because it's digital and it's fiber optic fed, you can put the control room anywhere now. And what we did is we took the control room and dropped it down into the center of the ship where the hull is at its widest. So the control room is large, it's spacious, it's brightly lit, and we brought sonar out of the sonar shack and put it in the control room with the rest of the attack center. So those guys are no longer off on their own, they're integrated, and that makes for a more complete tactical picture on this class of ship. This is a shot of the inside of the ship. You can see what I mean with the large digital displays. So instead of somebody with their eye glued to a periscope barrel waltzing with the one-eyed witch, you can put an entire control room party around these large screens. The screens can be fed throughout the ship, greatly enhancing situational awareness. This, believe it or not, is a torpedo room. Torpedo rooms of old ships were full of hydraulic valves and mechanical type controls. Again, this brings us into the digital age with touchscreen controls. And also, because it's all software-based, we can reconfigure the torpedo room pretty much at our will for different types of mission support. I talked about SEALs and integrating with Special Operating with South Type Forces. When we were doing that with 688 class, Los Angeles class, and Seawolf class, we were moving SEALs in and out of the ship through small chambers, the escape chambers that were already there on the ship. And because they were small, we could only move 2 or 3 SEALs out at a time, fully loaded out with their gear. Virginia class has a 9-man lockout chamber. The SEALs love it because if you're moving 9 people in and out of the ship, that's when those guys are at their most vulnerable, and that's kind of a risky event. So being able to quickly cycle through larger groups of people makes that an enhanced capability. This shows some shots of dry deck shelter and SEAL type supports. I believe this is New Hampshire when she did the class acceptance testing for that. So we'll kind of move through these, take a look at what that looks like. Next. All right, again, on a previous class of ship, if you walked into the control room, you would see something that looks like aircraft controls, a yoke. On Virginia class, instead, you see a joystick and touchscreens. This is the primary ship control here. Because it's a kind of a complex system, too, you see you've got chief petty officers running it, and they're referred to as pilot and co-pilot. They're no longer the helm and the planes. This is a diesel operator screen, so you can see kind of the degree to which digital controls have infiltrated down to almost every system that's on board the ship. Even logs, no longer paper logs. Virginia class is a paperless ship. All the procedures for operating the equipment, all the logs, and many of the logs are even operated. So instead of a sailor walking around and reading gauges and meters, an operator on one of the primary stations will hit a button and the logs will take themselves. So that's kind of about the ship and some of the things that are built into it. Where California is at in her delivery process, like I said, is coming quickly to a close here. Right now she's working through some of her propulsion plant testing. What's immediately ahead of her when she's through her examinations is the initial startup of her reactor, followed by her crew certifications, and ultimately by sea trials this summer. We talked about what you guys do as far as supporting the mission of the Navy, embracing the crew. I wanted to point out to you that not only is this ship yours in name, but it's also yours in crew members. 14 members of California's pre-commissioning crew are California natives, and this shows their names and where they're from throughout the state. 14 is an incredible number. I was blown away when I asked the XO and he came back with that number, because usually I expected 3 or 5, it was like 14 crew members. This is the Great Seal of the ship. I know that the captain has many things that he wants to share with you guys as you move through and get closer to the commissioning. But that wraps up my formal remarks. I just want to leave a few minutes for questions. Yes, sir.
The size of the crew?
The question is how many crew members are on board. Virginia class are a little bit leaner than previous ship classes. We come in at 122 crew members. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The fiber optics allow you to visualize, to view all degrees of the surface at the same time, rather than the periscope that we're just looking forward to left to right?
No, it's like there are developments. The question was, does the fiber optics enable you to see 360 degrees all at once? Was that your question? No, it's trainable like a camera, and that helps us because sometimes there's a lot of clutter out there that you just really aren't too interested in, and we'll narrow the field of view down to what we are interested in. Yes?
Service life of the carriers are estimated at 50 years. Submarine, have they increased that with metallurgy because of the metal stresses when they die?
The question is, is the longevity of the ship, and are there any enhancements to that? Probably the single biggest one is that previous ship classes had to refuel the reactor usually about 2/3 of the way through their service life. This has a life of ship core, so roughly 40 years is the expected time frame for this ship. So long after I'm talking about submarines, that ship will still be out there doing great things. Yes, sir?
What's the kilowatt output of the nuclear
I'm not certain, so I'm going to have to take the look up on that and get back to you.
Is it enough to run a small city?
No, it's not that much. Yes, sir.
Is there a billeting set up in this ship for women aboard the submarine?
No, the ship was designed during the all-male submarine force. I don't think it would take... The Navy's plan to move women in submarines starts with the ships that are easy to modify to accommodate privacy concerns and head arrangements for female crew members. The ships that are the easiest to do that on are the ballistic missile submarines because of the interior volume. These ships, everything is squeezed together very tightly, so to modify them to incorporate what you're talking about, there's initiatives underway to make that happen for the Block 3 and the Block 4 contracts, which are the later ships in the Virginia class. But the ones that we're building today, it does take a while to get all the design modifications done. So it's a future initiative, but for fast attack submarines, not yet. Yes, ma'am.
Has there been or will there be the traditional launching with the bottle of champagne?
Well, the question was, will there be a traditional type launching with a bottle of champagne? The bottle of champagne is broken at the christening ceremony, but it's not as dramatic as the past where it's going to shoot down the waves and splash in the river. You saw the video. It's kind of a controlled event with a lot of people. It's a lot of attention to make sure that that's done right. We don't splash them in the river anymore. Anybody else? One more? Yes, sir.
Look at glass cockpit, things, are they still going to maintain and navigate with traditional paper plot just in case?
No, this is a paperless ship. We've been working with electronic navigation now for about 6 to 8 years, and we're through the growing pains of that. We have the confidence in the systems to go all electronic, so there are no paper charts. Virginia had some because lead ship, we weren't sure the computer would be robust enough to get through all the initial testing, which is very intense, but we're past that, so no charts.
Where did they do the sea trials?
The sea trials, there's 2 locations. For Norfolk-built ships, it's out off the Bay Capes, the Virginia Cape operating areas, and for electric boat ships, which are further north, it's out in the Narragansett Bay operating areas. It's an area that's far enough offshore that the water is deep enough to take the ship down to test depth, but it's also below the crush depth, or it's shallower than the crush depth of the submarine, so that if there is a problem, the ship will settle to the bottom and it won't crush, and then it can be recovered. Yeah, good planning. Yes?
Sir, do they still have to do hot racking, or is there enough crew berthing for everybody?
No, hot racking, I'm afraid, is still a reality on Virginia-class ships. I wish I could say there was a rack for everybody, but there's not.
Captain,
I'll take one more, but I don't want to bleed too much into the Admiral's time. Yes, sir.
the most important question to the audience here, perhaps, the USS California, when she becomes that, when will we know where she's going to be home porting?
Home porting decisions are kind of fluid right now. The Admiral upstairs talked to the press about the 60-40 plan to split roughly 60% of the Navy assets between, put those in the Pacific area of interest and 40% on the East Coast where things are kind of quieter. But final home porting decisions for a ship is kind of a fluid target. So what the ship will move through after delivery is a shakedown period. She'll go out and run her systems and do testing that we cannot do land-based or during sea trials at special instrumented ranges down in AUTEC. So that's about 6 months to get through that shakedown period, and then we bring her back to the yard for a post-shakedown availability to fix everything we broke while it's still under warranty, so to speak. So the yard is on the hook for fixing things through PSA. So post-delivery, we've got that, so that adds up to a year, and in a year, a lot of things can change. So I suspect probably at the start of the ship's PSA, which I believe is roughly summer of next year, is when you'll know that home porting is in. Yes, sir.
We want to thank you for sharing with us your time and also for letting us know about the birth of the California to a room full of Californians. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you very much. What a great transition.
This is Doug Crawford with the Navy League of the United States, the Santa Barbara Council, and we're here at the Maritime Museum in Santa Barbara, California, and very honored to have a very important person from the environmental side of things, from the Navy, from the safety side of things, and even from the submariner side of things. We have Rear Admiral William French, and thank you, sir, for being here with the Navy League tonight.
Hey, Doug, thanks for having me. It's been a great pleasure to be here and get to meet some of the great folks here at the Navy League that make such a big difference for our sailors and Marines and Coast Guardsmen.
Well, your presentation this evening had to do with an incredible Navy, the men and women that serve in our services. And can you tell us a little bit about what the people that work for you, how many people you have, kind of what their age is, and what your primary mission is now, and what can we do to help you?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. As I mentioned during the presentation, I really wanted to talk about the maritime strategy and what the Navy does. And we can't do our mission without the great sailors that are out there every day. And the quality of the folks that are coming in the Navy today are as good as it's ever been. And you watch those young men and women on an aircraft carrier deck doing their job day in and day out, motivated, working as a team to make a difference. It's really what makes our Navy great. And so it's great to be able to come here with Santa Barbara Navy League that's got such a wonderful reputation for helping sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and their families. I got to meet your Sea Cadet folks that were up here as part of this event. And so it's been wonderful, and it's always a great opportunity to be able to talk about the Navy and talk about our sailors.
It means so much to the education of the people to have you come and be able to present exactly what the Navy does. The honor to be able to serve as a volunteer in the Navy League comes when we have people like yourselves and the teams of people that you have coming with you to talk about the job that you do. And we just want to thank you for your service to our country, for your leadership, and certainly here in Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona, your responsibility is a broad one for the environment. So we thank you for what you're doing and ask that anything that we can do to help you, you let us know what that's going to be.
Will do, and thanks for, again, it's an opportunity for us to tell Santa Barbara and the folks that live here how much of a difference the Navy League makes, and a little bit of an opportunity for us to say what the Navy does and what our sailors are doing. It's great to see 4 council members here today. It's great to see the wonderful support that the Navy League gets, the Navy gets here in Santa Barbara. So as I mentioned earlier during the brief, there's 14 folks in the USS California that's named after this great state that are from California, and I'm sure as more and more crew members come here and have a chance to spend time in Santa Barbara, you'll have more and more residents or wannabe residents in California. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's been great.
Well, Admiral French has talked about something that we'll be talking with you more about in future television programs, having to do with the great state of California having one of our newest Navy vessels, the PCU, soon to be USS California, a nuclear submarine that is going to be hopefully adopted by the Santa Barbara Council. So we look for your help and we look for your support. And again, we all applaud and thank you all for the service you do for our country. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting us be here today.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, that's great.
Hey,
Thanks.
one take.
As one Secretary of the Navy said, the sun never sets on the Navy League.